A car accident brought Li Feiluo, a farmer, to an empty dynasty and became a 4-year-old chubby girl named Ouyang Feiluo. What? As soon as he comes, his head is opened and he needs to be exiled. Ding, your golden finger is online, plain trading system, there's nothing you can't buy, only things you can't think of, as long as you have enough money. Ouyang Feiluo and her family are on the road of exile and never come back, but why did the cowhide candy she saved stick to her keywords of the novel? Exile with the plain trading system. I laughed without a pop-up window and exiled with the plain trading system. I laughed and downloaded the complete TXT collection. Exile with the plain trading system. I laughed and read the latest chapter. Chapter 1. Sister Protection Madness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Sister Protection Madness. Luo, or little sister. Mother, big brother, what's wrong with little sister? Why did she fall? The boy's urgent voice came into the ear of a beautiful woman wiping away tears. Before the beautiful woman could answer, she heard a sincere voice again. Madam, has Luo woken up? What does the doctor say? Big brother, where's the third brother? My little sister has an accident, why isn't he here? Don't you usually love my little sister? A sound of urgency and concern came, and the chubby person on the bed furrowed their brows slightly. Then there was no movement and they continued to fall asleep. The beautiful woman sitting by the bed looked at her daughter, who had been sleeping all along, with a heart-wrenching look. She reached out and grabbed the 2 young men who were about to come forward, and tearfully said, Luo, Su, hurry to your uncle's house and bring back the third one. Don't let him cause any trouble. Your mother has her own idea about this today. Mother. As soon as Ouyang Feiluo called out for his mother, he was stopped by a man beside him who was emitting a cold air. Suer, listen to your mother. Luo, go and return quickly. Ouyang Seoul Tower, 15, saw the coldness in his parents' eyes, and intuitively felt that this matter had something to do with his uncle's family. But now he is a senior official in the imperial court, and his father is just a businessman. No. His father is not even a businessman, at best he is just a manager who manages the shop for the Ouyang family. This has caused a generation of successful candidates to give up their career in managing their family store. It is feared that in the capital of Nuoda, only their Ouyang family is left. This is really ironic. Ouyang Seoul Tower didn't speak, but pulled Ouyang Feiluo out of the house with a stiff face and a little unwilling, and then hurried to the Jiaohui courtyard where their uncle lived. Along the way, the maidservant and servant saw 2 angry young masters, so frightened that they dared not speak up. They anxiously lowered their heads and stood aside, waiting for them to walk for a while before raising their hand to pat their chest. They quickly left in shock. As soon as the 2 of them arrived not far from Jiaohui courtyard, they heard a childish voice shouting. Ouyang Feiluo, do you think the young master doesn't know what you're up to? Don't you think our 3 brothers are spoiling Luo? What's wrong? Our 3 brothers are spoiling our own younger sister, and what's wrong with you, Li Feiluo? I'll tell you, if my sister loses a strand of hair, the young master will set fire to your Qinghe garden tomorrow, making you a waterless green lotus. 12-year-old Ouyang Feiluo looked at his older brother who was frowning and pouting at him, and in an instant, his heart was filled with happiness. Third brother, what are you still shouting about here? I have a hole in my head, and I can't stop bleeding. If you don't keep an eye on me, why are you here? The little person standing outside the tightly closed courtyard door, jumping and shouting, immediately walked to the closed courtyard door. Lucky enough, they lifted their feet, followed by 3 bangs of kicking at the door. Seeing the closed courtyard door shake and begin to crack, Ouyang Seoul Tower and Ouyang Feiluo immediately set up an arm of Ouyang Feiluo and quickly left towards the way they came. At the same time, he was saying, Third, you're so impolite. I made you look at my little sister. Where did you go wild? Big brother, this third one just needs to be cleaned up. The next second, Ouyang Seoul Tower heard a loud bang in the direction of the Chaohui courtyard gate, slightly raised his mouth, and said, "Yes, I need to clean up. If I don't guard my little sister well, I will run around and let my mother beat him later." Ouyang Mingli, who was standing upside down, still shouted, "Ouyang Billion, wait for the young master. The young master will set fire to your Qinghe garden tomorrow, making your hands cheap and daring to push the young master's sister. Ouyang Billion, you dare not admit it. Don't think that with your grandparents protecting you, you can be lawless. The young master will go out tomorrow to promote and publicize for you. Ouyang Billion's heart is like a snake and a scorpion. Ah bah. Putting your green lotus and snake scorpion together is lowering the level of the snake scorpion. You are just a puddle of black mud." Ouyang Mingli, who was being held up, cursed all the way, while his two brothers, who were holding him up, occasionally spoke to him and walked with a gust of wind under their feet, making it difficult for those who wanted to say Ouyang Mingli to speak. Even Mrs. Ouyang, who had always protected Ouyang Feiluo, did not speak when she saw the appearance of the three brothers, but walked towards the courtyard of the second room with steps. It's not how much the old lady dotes on Ouyang Feiluo, but rather to see if that sharp-tongued little girl's head really has a hole. She doesn't want her precious granddaughter Lianer to suffer any injustice. He Jin Yuan. This is the courtyard of the second room. Ouyang Feiluo's father, Ouyang Jin, was the second son of Ouyang Hong. At the age of 18, he passed the imperial examination and became a Jinshe master. There should have been a position of official and semi-official, but old lady Ouyang didn't agree for some reason. She desperately asked Ouyang Jin to go home and take care of the business of the Ouyang family. The newly minted Jinshe master has become the manager of the family business, which is probably the first in the entire capital and even the entire Wuxi kingdom. And this management lasted for 20 years, a whole 20 years. The best years were gone like this, with only vicissitudes and increasingly cold hearts. The three brothers had just entered Ouyang Feiluo's room and saw their mother sitting by the bed wiping tears and their father comforting her. They quickly spoke up, "Father, Mother, has the blood stopped? Has the little sister woken up? Mom, how's your little sister doing?" The beautiful woman lifted her head and looked at her three sons with red eyes. Before she could speak, she heard the voice of a maid coming from outside the door. "Hello madam, both the second master and second madam are in Mrs. room, and the three young masters are also present." "Well, come on, help me take a look at your young lady." "Yes, old lady." The beautiful woman glared at her three sons and said, "How did you attract the old lady?" The three brothers shrugged and gestured, "Who knows?" Ouyang Jin walked quickly to the outside to greet his mother and said, "My son pays his mother's respects." Mrs. Ouyang raised her hand and said, all right, let me take a look at Miss Luo." Yes, Ouyang Jin respectfully followed old lady Ouyang and walked towards the interior. Madame Ouyang entered and saw the woman sobbing with her head down. She didn't speak, but her face clearly showed some unease. Ouyang Jin approached his wife Su Shi and gently patted her shoulder, whispering, "Madam, my mother has come to see Luo heir." The beautiful woman just lifted her head and looked at the old lady with a pair of swollen and red eyes. The next second, she knelt down towards the old lady and kowtowed her head, crying and pleading, "Mother, please help Luo heir, help Luo heir. She's only 4 years old, please ask her mother to save Luo heir." Seeing his mother kneeling down to beg for his grandmother, the three brothers of Ouyang Seoul Tower also plopped down to their knees and kowtowed to old lady Ouyang. "Grandma, please save my sister." Mrs. Ouyang saw this and stretched her neck to glance at the person on the bed. "I saw a person who used to be pink and chubby now has a face whiter than paper, with a circle of white gauze wrapped around her forehead. A large patch of blood seeped out from the white gauze, indicating that this usually sharp-tongued girl is now lying quietly on the bed, not angry at this moment. The scolding that had not yet been uttered in her throat was suppressed by the situation in front of her. She quietly glanced at the little person on the bed and Mrs. Ouyang sighed, "Let's all get up. Su, what does the doctor say? Returning to my mother, the doctor said that Luo heir had lost too much blood, broke her left hand, and was frightened. She may have a high fever tonight that will not subside. She said that if she passes tonight, she will no longer have a fever tomorrow and will have to take care of it for 3 to 5 months. Upon hearing this, old Master Ouyang also exclaimed in surprise, so serious. Did you prescribe medicine? I've already let the maid endure. Madame Ouyang nodded and went to the outside to speak to a maid dressed in a pink dress, saying, Fendai, take 50 taels of silver notes from my room for the second master, and then go tell the butler that Lady Luo's medicine money will be taken from our mansion's account. Yes, madam, Fendai will go right away. Su, come over here. I have something to tell you. Upon hearing these words, Su thought of what the old lady had just told the maid. She felt that this was a warning to her not to pursue this matter. Every time it was this move, did she really think she was being manipulated? Su lowered her head and restrained the expression in her eyes, then walked up to old lady Ouyang and said, Mother, please speak. Miao Miao's new book is coming, thanks for the support of brothers and sisters. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Time Traveling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Time Traveling. Looking at her gentle daughter.in.law, old lady Ouyang flashed a lifeless little figure lying quietly on the bed before her eyes. She sighed and swallowed the words that had already reached her throat, admonishing, Take care of Miss Luo. Then she left the Hejin courtyard with her maid. Watching Mrs. Ouyang leave after saying these words, the 4 of Su's mother and son were slightly stunned, then turned their heads in confusion to look at Ouyang Jin, who was frowning tightly. Ouyang Jin shook her head and didn't say anything. She just walked over to the table and sat down, thinking about something with her head down. At this moment, a maid walked in with a bowl of medicine and said, Master, Madam, Mrs. Medicine is ready. Hearing the words, Su took the medicine bowl and said, Give it to me. Go down and make some congee for the young lady. Yes, madam. The maid bowed and retreated in response. Su gave her medicine spoonfuls by spoonfuls, although she didn't drink much, she still drank some. She wiped the corners of her mouth, tucked in the blanket, and called for a maid to come and guard. Only then did she free up time to ask her poisonous-tongued son about it. After leaving her daughter's room, Su walked straight into the adjacent Qingsong courtyard and saw not only her 3 sons but also her master in the living room. It seemed that she was waiting for her. Stepping into the living room, he looked directly at Ouyang Mingli, who was 3 or 8 years old, and asked, Mingli, what's going on? Mom, today at the rockery, I saw that my little sister only wore 1 pearl flower on her head. After asking, she said she forgot it at home and her son came back to bring it to her. After pausing for a moment, Ouyang Mingli continued, as my son was about to arrive with the pearl flower in his hand, I happened to see Ouyang Billion reaching out to push the little girl, as if she was saying that she disliked her. Did you see it clearly? Ouyang Mingli said with a stern expression, You're really looking at it. But before my son came back to pick up the pearl flowers, there was a maid named Kaiyue by my side. Kaiyue. Yes. Su sneered, Okay, this is because I feel that being a mother is weak and easy to bully. This time, I will let you know if I am a gentle cat. Ouyang Jin, who had been silent for a long time, looked at his wife and saw the anger in her eyes. He silently mourned for the person who bullied his daughter. His wife, Lady Su, comes from a family of generals. His 3 sons are all strong, and the strongest one is the 3rd one who jumps off. At the age of 8, they can easily lift the 2 adults up. After pondering for a moment, Ouyang Jin turned his head and asked his 3 sons, Lu heir, did Mingli cause trouble today? Ouyang Minglu, who was named, touched his nose and was just thinking about how to answer, when he heard the arrogant voice of the 3rd child. Dad, Mom, how obedient I am. How can I cause trouble? That's. The door in that uncle's yard is not sturdy, and I kicked it 3 times before it broke. Dad, will uncle let you compensate for the door? Upon hearing this, Su Shi, who was thinking about how to deal with those people, immediately looked over and looked at his third son in confusion, 3 times. That's the door you kicked 3 times to break. Mom, didn't you tell me not to exert too much force? I just kicked 3 times with 3/10 of force. After finishing, I gestured 3 times with my fingers. Oh, it's okay then. If your uncle wants to compensate your father for that door, let him go over and guard it for them. We don't have any money. You continue, I'll take a look at my precious daughter. Su said and walked out, leaving the father and son behind. Look at me, I'll take a look at you. Su Shi had been guarding Ouyang Feiluo by the bed, watching her lively and lovely daughter lying motionless. She felt extremely uncomfortable and couldn't help but sob softly again. Li Feiluo, who had a splitting headache, heard sobs in her ear and thought it was because she had been hospitalized in a car accident. Her Empress Dowager was sad. Upon careful listening, it didn't seem like it, so I endured the pain and slowly opened my eyes to look for the sound. At first glance, it was amazing, it scared her so much that she couldn't close her mouth for a long time. She unexpectedly saw a beautiful woman dressed in ancient attire, blinked her eyes, turned her head to look at the somewhat dark room, which was full of antique charm, without the white ICU ward and various instruments she had imagined. At this moment, an extraordinary idea appeared in her heart. Is this a time travel for oneself? She suppressed the pain and wanted to sit up with her right hand, only then did she realize how small her hands were. Her slender fingers had turned into chubby little hands, and her eyes were filled with shock as she looked at her chubby little hands, unable to regain consciousness for a long time. The sobbing beauty felt the movement of the people on the bed, raised her head to see the awakened girl, and asked with concern. Luoer, you are awake. Is your head still sore? Hungry, my mother asked someone to bring you congee. Then he hurriedly shouted to the outside. Chase the moon, the new moon, and bring the congee to the young lady. Yes, madam. Li Feiluo listened to this title, looked at her chubby hands again, then closed her eyes and took a few deep breaths to relax herself, wanting to let go of the bold speculation in her heart. Seeing that her daughter closed her eyes and fell asleep again, Su sighed and waved to the servant girl who came in with congee. The servant girl looked at the lady with closed eyes on the bed, and then withdrew knowingly, putting congee in the small kitchen to continue warming. At this moment, Li Feiluo was not unwilling to open his eyes, but unable to do so. At this moment, she seemed to have arrived at a space shrouded in clouds and mist. As she looked around, a chubby little girl suddenly appeared in front of her. As soon as the little girl arrived, she bent down to thank her and said, Sister, thank you. Thank me. Why thank me? Where is this? Sister, I'm leaving now. Can you please take care of my parents more in the future? Don't worry about the brothers, they will have a sister-in-law to take care of them when they grow up. Li Feiluo looked curiously at the chubby little girl in front of her and said, You can take care of your parents. The little girl shook her head and said, Sister, I can't go back. I'll rely on you from now on. As soon as the little girl finished speaking, her figure began to dissipate. Li Feiluo, who had always liked to be soft, cute, and chubby, widened her eyes and suddenly shouted, Come back. With this loud shout, not only did the people on the bed sit up, but even Su, who was guarding beside her, also sat up. The 2 maids outside heard the sound and quickly asked, Madam, is Miss awake? Su looked at his daughter, who was still gasping in shock, and said to the outside, Yes, it's okay now. You guys should rest. Yes, madam. Su carefully hugged her panting daughter and whispered, Luoer is not afraid, Luoer is not afraid, where is the mother, and where is the mother? Li Feiluo let the woman in front of her who claimed to be her mother hold her, feeling her tenderness, and slowly calmed down herself. After calming down, I began to organize the memories in my mind. The original owner, Ouyang Feiluo, was a chubby 4-year-old girl who was pushed down from the rockery by her cousin Ouyang Feiluo and broke her head before going straight. And her young career woman in the new era, Li Feiluo, who owns her own farm and faces the landlady's mother, was threatened by her family's queen dowager's deadly chain of threats to go on a blind date. On the way to the blind date location while driving, a series of car accidents occurred due to being rear-ended by someone, catching up with the trend and becoming one of the millions of passers-by. This wave of travel has shrunk from a 28-year-old forced marriage girl to a 4-year-old chubby doll. Isn't the contrast too big? Thinking of his modern farm, villa, and luxury car, Li Feiluo, now named Ouyang Feiluo, felt a pang of discomfort in his heart. Her Empress Dowager is not here, who is arguing with her. His brother is away from home all year round, but fortunately, he has a sister-in-law who can come home to see the Empress Dowager every 3 to 5 days. Otherwise, what should her Empress Dowager do? After sorting out the family situation of this body, Ouyang Feiluo relaxed in Sue's gentle embrace and felt drowsy. Ariel Ancient Times, thank you for your support. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Plain Trading System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Plain Trading System. Little Feiluo, who was drowsy, suddenly opened her eyes. It turned out that a cold mechanical sound had just echoed in her mind. Considering that the host is injured at a young age and will be exiled after 5 hours, a primary-level trading system is specially issued. May I ask if the host chooses to bind or give up? Ouyang Feiluo, who was already clear-headed, quickly said to himself. Plain trading system. Exile. I'll go. Bind, 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 say important things 3 times. As soon as Ouyang Feiluo finished speaking about binding, the mechanical sound rang out again. Bind 1% to 15% to 49% to 75% to 99% to the primary level trading system successfully. Host, this is an upgradable version. Please refer to the manual of the plain trading system for instructions on how to upgrade. This plain trading system comes with a built-in space, which can be seen by the host with just a thought in mind. Wishing the host a happy journey of exile. Have fun playing. Thank you. However, when he heard that there was space, Ouyang Feiluo's eyes lit up. With space, he could store things, and this is a plain trading system, which means he can trade. Anyway, let's take a look at the space first. Ouyang Feiluo, who was held by Su Shi, calmed down and then gently patted her mother's hand, saying, Mother, I'm fine. Thank you, Mother. I thought it would be difficult to shout out the word Mother, but I didn't expect it to be so smooth that after being released by Su Shi, Ouyang Feiluo was still a bit stunned. Seeing her daughter speechless, Su called out softly, Luor. Ah, Mother, I'm fine, she said, smiling at her mother Su. Seeing that her daughter was really fine, Su Shizhong was about to speak when Ouyang Feiluo waved her head to signal not to speak. Although Su was somewhat puzzled, he still remained silent and looked at Ouyang Feiluo nervously. At this moment, Li Feiluo was staring at the virtual scene in front of her with a pair of apricot eyes. Firstly, there was a space as large as a sports hall, and then she was thinking about the plain trading system. The scene in front of her instantly switched. What appears in front of us is a screen similar to a small store, with 5 item columns. On the right side, there is a button for the next page, and on the bottom row, there are 5 buttons. Store, Backpack, Friends, Information, and Personal Center. There is also a button for the user manual in the upper right corner. Ouyang Feiluo thought for a moment and tentatively thought about the user manual in her heart. In an instant, she saw the button move and then a long box popped up. Li Feiluo took a rough look and knew that this level trading system was the most basic. Only by trading a certain number of times and accumulating a certain amount of system currency can this system be upgraded. After upgrading, not only will the categories of things purchased by oneself become more comprehensive, but also the transaction fees paid by the exchange will be correspondingly reduced. This is a good thing. I quickly scanned and then clicked on the backpack below. I saw 20 squares inside, and then clicked on the personal center. Suddenly, a box popped up, with only one sentence inside. Suspend the ancient Li Feiluo. After flipping through it, there were no special markings. Ouyang Feiluo was afraid that Su Shi would be in a hurry, so she quickly retreated and looked at Su Shi sweetly, shouting, "Mom." Su answered happily, and then said softly, "Luo are you hungry? My mother asked the servant girl to bring you congee." Thinking about what would happen 5 hours later, Ouyang Feiluo quickly called Su Shi, who wanted to call the maid, and said, "Mom, wait a moment. Luo has something to say to you." Seeing Su look over, Ouyang Feiluo spoke up and asked, "Mother, what time is it now? What time will it be 5 hours later?" Although Su didn't know where to go, she answered her daughter's question. "It should be the end of the ugly time now. In 5 hours, that would be noon." "Luo, but what's important about tomorrow's noon?" Upon hearing this, Ouyang Feiluo's mother Su didn't know how to speak, but she thought that the original owner of her body was a group pet, so she decided to believe this mother for once. In the puzzled gaze of her mother, Ouyang Feiluo took his pillow with his right hand and placed it in front of her mother Su Shi, then thought to put it away. In the blink of an eye, the pillow disappeared. Just as Su was about to shout, the pillow appeared again. After several repetitions, Su's wriggling lips looked at Ouyang Feiluo and asked in a low voice, "Luo, did you do that just now?" Ouyang Feiluo nodded, then her small face turned stern and she looked at Su Shi seriously, saying, "Mom, I had a nightmare. In my dream, my whole family was exiled after tomorrow afternoon. I was both scared and hungry, and suddenly a sister said to give me a gift so that I wouldn't go hungry, and then I woke up." Su shook her hands and said, "The gift you mentioned earlier that could make things disappear and then reappear was the one you mentioned, Luo." Ouyang Feiluo said in a frightened tone, You can hide things. Only I can find them. Mother, do I become?" Su quickly covered his daughter's mouth, made a shush gesture, motioned her not to say, and then whispered in her ear. "My mother asked someone to bring you congee. After you had congee, my mother took you out for a walk." Seeing Ouyang Feiluo nodding, Su Shi then shouted to the outside. "Crescent, bring Miss Congee." "Yes, madam." In no time, a maid dressed in a green dress walked in carrying a tray. There is a small pottery jar, a small bowl, and a spoon on the tray. Seeing the servant girl coming in, Su Shi stood up and said, "Put it on the table and go down to have a rest. Miss has drunk congee, and I will take her to see the master." "Yes." Ouyang Feiluo opens his mouth to talk. As soon as he opens his mouth, his mother feeds him a mouthful of congee, and he looks at Su in a daze. Looking at her somewhat naive and lovely daughter, Su Shi smiled lightly and said, "What's wrong? Do you think your mother doesn't believe you?" Ouyang Feiluo shook his head, ate the congee her mother had fed, and his eyes were full of questions. Su put away a faint smile and sighed, saying, "A few days ago, your grandfather delivered a message saying that our Ouyang family has been targeted by that person. I don't know exactly what happened, but he said it might be related to your uncle. The nightmare you just mentioned may have been a warning to us, but you must not tell anyone about your gift, remember." Ouyang Feiluo swallowed a mouthful of congee, looked at her mother and asked softly, "Can't my father and brothers talk?" "I won't say it for now. The time has come, my mother." Upon hearing these words, Ouyang Feiluo had no worries. Based on her previous life's perspective on people, she felt that this mother looked gentle and petty, but in fact, she was a tough master. With such a mother around, she seemed to be able to be a real child. After Ouyang Feiluo nodded and agreed, the mother and daughter fed each other. After a while, Ouyang Feiluo ate a bowl of congee. After looking at her belly and shaking her head, she said she couldn't eat anymore. Su finally put down her bowl, took her small shoes, and put them on for her. She also took a piece of clothing to put on for her. "I just got up and carried her out of the house, walking towards the side of the yard. New book for collection, thank you, end of this chapter. Chapter 4. Arrangement. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Arrangement. Su held Ouyang Feiluo and arrived at a locked door. He first placed little Feiluo at the door, then took out a small key from his waist belt and clicked it open. Looking down at Ouyang Feiluo with her slightly open mouth, Su gently pushed open the door and then flew out of the hallway to take a lantern. She reached out her left hand and led Ouyang Feiluo in, whispering, "Luo, can we keep all of this?" Ouyang Feiluo looked at the boxes and shelves that were about the whole room, nodded hurriedly, and then collected wherever her eyes went. In a moment, the entire room was empty. A hint of smile flashed in Su's eyes. Regardless of whether she would be exiled after tomorrow afternoon, she was most at ease with Luo when these things were placed there. Those dowries were originally given to Luo, so why not give them to her early? The mother and daughter didn't say anything, locked the door and hung the lantern back. Everything returned to its original state, and then walked towards Su and his house. Su originally intended to empty out the treasures in the large courtyard, but she thought that her daughter was too young and had just woken up with a weak body, so she gave up this idea and went straight back to the room with her daughter. Ouyang Feiluo was carried by Su into a room with lights still on. The layout in the room was her favorite minimalist style, and her eyes were looking around. As I was looking around, a thick voice came to my ears. "Madam, is Luo awake?" "Great, Luo, come and have your father hug you," Ouyang Jin said, putting down the book in his hand and reaching out to hold Ouyang Feiluo from Madame Su's hand. Ouyang Feiluo also cooperated and shouted, "Daddy." Listening to his daughter's soft and cute voice, Ouyang Jin's heart melted and he quickly spoke up, "Hey, is our Luo hungry?" "I've eaten it, my mother fed it." "I've eaten well, just woke up and my body is weak." "Dad will take you to rest, okay?" This is a good inquiry, but as soon as Ouyang Jin spoke, she had already walked towards the interior holding Ouyang Feiluo. As soon as Su saw it, he got it. "This old man has the appearance of a woman doing everything, I really don't know what to say." Su Shi, who took the wrong step, turned around and closed the door with a smile and shook her head. She quickly walked into the room and looked at Ouyang Feiluo, who was already lying on the bed, saying, "Luo, get a good sleep. Let's talk when we wake up. Be good and obedient." Ouyang Feiluo, who had an adult mindset, understood her mother's meaning and nodded. She closed her eyes and went to sleep, actually studying her plane trading system. The couple lightly patted the quilt on Ouyang Feiluo's body, comforted him for a while, and then gestured to go outside with their eyes. Su whispered a few words in her ear to Ouyang Jin, who immediately changed her expression and whispered, "I see, this is probably true." Su was surprised and said, "What do you mean?" After pondering for a moment, Ouyang Jin looked at his wife Su with a serious expression and said, "Madam, I know you have good martial arts skills. You can organize your dowry shop, zhuangzi, and other things, and send back the contract for the yard property we purchased to your father. In law." Seeing the expression on her husband's face, Su knew she wouldn't come up with empty promises, so she nodded and said, "I'll also give my mother the sales contract of the maid who came with me as a dowager, so she can see and make a decision." "Master, what else is there?" Ouyang Jin sighed and said, "If it's true, it's a pity that the books in our study are." Su confidently took it over and said, "I'll pack it all and send it to my mother's house. We'll contact her once we're safe, and it'll be delivered when the time comes." After speaking, Su took out a large red lacquer-carved box from the cabinet on one side of the dressing table, opened the box, removed the upper compartment, and took out some paper from inside to look at it. "First, I folded the deed of ownership of the fields in the courtyard of the shop and put it in my sleeve pocket. Then, I took a look at the deed of ownership and made sure it was correct. I folded it and placed it in the middle of my waist belt. Everything was ready, and she pointed to Ouyang Jin's daughter on the bed, gesturing for him to keep an eye on her. Only then did Su leave the room and use her lightness skills to fly away. Su, with the surname Su and the name Yuzhu, is the youngest in the family. She has 2 older brothers and 1 older sister. Although she may seem like a little girl, she has been pampered by the whole family since childhood. My father Shujo was once a military general. Although he is now idle at home, he still has his unique insights into the political affairs of the Wuxi kingdom. My mother is happy, knowledgeable, and courteous. She is kind and amiable. Although she has already allowed her 2 sons and daughter-in-law to live on their own, they still live in the same courtyard and get along harmoniously, enjoying themselves harmoniously. After a cup of tea, Su Yuzhu flew into the courtyard from the side door of the Su family. As soon as I took 2 steps to the ground, I heard a voice that sounded like a bell. Who is that? Upon hearing the sound, Su Yuzhu quickly spoke up and said, Fu Shun, it's me, Miss Air. Don't shout, take me to see my father quickly. Upon hearing Su Yuzhu's urgent voice, the person named Fu Shun hurriedly said, Miss Air. Miss Air, please follow me. Under the clever guidance of Fu Shun, Su Yuzhu bypassed the people in the mansion and arrived at her father's study. Miss Air, the master is in the study. Could you please take a look here? She lightly knocked on the door twice and said, Father, my jade bead. Upon hearing a knock on the door, Shujo put down the book in his hand and was about to ask, when he heard a familiar voice and hurriedly said, Come in quickly. Su Yuzhu entered the study and Shujo urgently asked, Pearl, what happened? Why did you come back late at night? Dad, please calm down first and listen to me. There may be some things happening at the Ouyang family recently, and my daughter is afraid of inconvenience. So she took these deeds back and handed them over to her parents to keep for her. Su Yuzhu, who was speaking, took out the deed from the sleeve pocket and waist of her clothes, placed it on the table, and continued, If my daughter is not in the capital, if the younger generation in the family needs any silver money in the future, Dad will take it from here. Additionally, these are the deeds of the maid and mother-in-law who accompanied me to the Ouyang family in the past. I have released some of them over the years, and you can let my mother decide on these. After finishing speaking, Su Yuzhu stood in front of her father Shujo and knelt down with a thud. She knocked her head 3 times before using her father's hand to get up. With tears in her eyes, she looked at her father, who was already gray in the temples, and said, Treasure, before turning around and leaving. Watching the daughter rushing in and out, Shujo's intuition became a master. The first thing that came to mind was what she had heard a few days ago, and a bad idea arose in her heart. Looking at the deed on the table, Shujo pondered for a moment before shouting towards the door of the study, Someone, Fu Shun, who was designated by Su Yuzhu to guard outside the study room, responded eagerly, Master. Seeing Fu Shun, Shujo's eyes flashed with a hint of confusion, and he urgently ordered, Hurry up and inform the master, the lady, the second master, the second lady, and the old lady to come to the study. Hurry up. Upon hearing this, Fu Shun thought to himself. It's broken. Something big must have happened. With a nod, he left the study and quickly went to the old man's place. Then, he went to the yard of the old man and the second man, eagerly repeating the old man's words. Then, he felt a gust of wind blowing around him. Looking carefully, what about the people? As the words arrived, Fu Shun exhaled a deep breath and quickly returned to the door of the study, becoming a goalkeeper. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Madam's lightness skills improved again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Madam's lightness skills improved again in the study room. The old lady Qilu sat on the side with those deeds, wiping away her tears. Shujo also sat on the side with a bitter face, his eyes filled with a worried expression. Seeing both sons and daughter-in-law coming, Shujo slowly spoke up and informed several people about the fact that their youngest daughter had returned home late at night, left these contracts, and quickly left. Upon hearing this, Su Yutsang, the elder brother of the Su family, frowned and said, Mom and Dad, my son heard rumors about what the Ouyang family is going to do, but there has been no definite news. Did you know anything about this, little sister? Su's sister.in-law Wen also felt that this sister.in-law must have known something, otherwise she wouldn't have sent these things to the house overnight. This was clearly making arrangements. After thinking for a moment, she spoke up and said, "Mom and Dad, my daughter.in-law thinks that my younger sister is afraid of falling into someone else's hands when she sends these back. We should clean up the people in these places early and replace them with people we can trust. My younger sister entrusted these to her family, hoping that they could help her keep them safe. It's hard to guarantee that one day they won't come back." Su Yulan, the second brother of the Su family, nodded in agreement and said, "Mom and Dad, what sister.in-law said is reasonable. And those maids and mother.in-law also need to be brought back." Su's sister.in-law Feng Wanqin quickly spoke up and said, "I'll go handle this pick.up. I said it was my sister.in-law who had agreed with the family earlier. I will go early tomorrow morning and inquire about what's going on." My husband, elder brother, sister.in-law, and a few older children at home all quickly walked through these shops, estates, and courtyards to avoid any trouble. Qi Lu, the old lady, also said angrily at this moment, "Tomorrow, go change the names of these deeds to my name first, and then you all go again. This way, even if those people want to make a fuss, they won't have to make a fuss." After pondering for a moment, Shuzhou thought it was the safest way, so he nodded and instructed his two sons, Yuzong and Yulan, "Your two brothers will go with your mother tomorrow to handle this matter first, and then go to various places for a walk. If you encounter any trouble, you can directly investigate the account, and if you don't match, report it to the official for handling." "Yes, father." "Feng Shi, tomorrow you will take Sister Wan to visit your little sister at Ouyang's house. Tell her that your mother said she didn't go home very much and ask her for a few people to come back and serve her mother. Bring some silver coins with you tomorrow. If something really happens and you have silver coins in your hand, don't panic in your heart." "Yes, my daughter.in-law has taken note." Shuzhou talked to his two sons for a while, explained some things, and then let the four of them go back, instructing them to leave early tomorrow morning. After the four of them left, Qi Lu held the deed in his hand and said with some concern, "Master, if there really is an accident. Our daughter, who is well cared for, doesn't know how much hardship she will have to endure." He then began to sob softly. Su Zhou sighed and lightly patted his wife's shoulder, saying, "Believe in our daughter, no matter where she is, she can live very well. Don't forget, she was taught by me. With her martial arts skills, she can't be too bad. You also have 3 smart grandsons who will take care of your daughter and granddaughter. Alas, I can only pray that everything goes smoothly for them. Go back to your room and see how much silver there is left. Bring your daughter and granddaughter with you. Okay, let's go." Originally, I planned to have the guards go on a trip, but when I thought about it, I was afraid of making people suspicious, so I gave up this idea. Let's just pretend we don't know anything and see what exactly happened. What a tumultuous autumn. "Master, I need to instruct everyone in the family and also knock on the people in each courtyard, so as not to have any thoughts." "Well, just arrange this matter for you." Shuzhou and Qila walked and talked, feeling more worried about their little daughter. At this moment, Su Yuzhu, who they were worried about, was tidying up her clothes, jewelry, and some silver coins in the room, muttering incessantly, afraid that she might have forgotten something. Ouyang Jin took advantage of the darkness and walked to the third room, then returned to her study and sorted out the books and booklets in the study while Ouyang Jin and his wife Su Yuzhu were tidying up the chubby little paper on the bed. Ouyang Feiluo was not idle and had been studying her plane trading system. First, I clicked on the store and looked through a few pages, only to find that it was full of daily necessities such as food and clothing. However, only the first page was available for purchase, and the rest were locked, which means they needed to be unlocked. Curious, I clicked on the first item on the second page and immediately received a prompt stating that the unlocking condition had not been met. Ouyang Feiluo is confused, do you still have unlocking conditions? Forget it, let's take a look at the others first. So I clicked back to the homepage and looked at the 5-item columns, which were 1 serving of steamed buns, 5 pieces, with a price of 1 system coin, 1 portion, 10 pieces, of white flour mantou, 1 system currency. Rice tuliang, 5 system coins, 1 portion of braised pork with beans, 15 system coins, stir-fry celery for 10 system coins. System currency. Ouyang Feiluo withdrew from the store, searched for the system currency on the system page, and finally saw an icon for a wallet in the upper left corner of the page. With a moment's thought, he clicked on it and immediately laughed. It turned out that there were system coins on her account, and she counted them one by one. 10, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 1 million. I'm a godmother and grandma. Surprisingly, there are 864,9863 system coins. Ouyang Feiluo shouted crazily in his heart. Get rich. Got rich. Got rich. Suddenly, she shifted her gaze back to the system currency numbers on her account, and then, with a constipated expression, gritted her teeth and said, "Make a fortune. That's the number on my mother's bank card. No wonder I felt familiar for a moment just now. It's my own money." After taking a few deep breaths, Ouyang Feiluo opened the user manual again with his mind and carefully read it. At this moment, Ouyang Feiluo seemed to be asleep to outsiders, but only she knew that she was now learning how to operate this basic system. In the previous life, after becoming a landlady, she began her biggest goal in life. To live a life of one man, and one woman, waiting for death. In this life, as a group pet, she felt that it was somewhat inappropriate to just eat and wait for death, especially during such times. She decided to upgrade the plain trading system to the highest level as soon as possible, so that she could continue to be her salted fish and live her salted fish life. After Ouyang Feiluo became familiar with the operation of the system, he opened his eyes and sat up from the bed. When he saw the empty interior, he exclaimed in confusion, "Mother! Father! Mother!" Su Yuzhu, who was tidying up outside, heard her daughter's soft and sticky voice. She quickly put down the things in her hand and walked into the inside, while also responding with a voice. "Yes, yes, Luo'er, my mother is here, Luo'er." Arriving at the bedside, Su Yuzhu looked at the chubby little bun who had already sat up and smiled softly, saying, "Is Luo'er awake or thirsty?" Ouyang Feiluo shook her head and said softly, "No, I haven't seen my mother and father." "Mother, what are you doing?" Su Yuzhu draped a small robe over her daughter and then carried her to the dressing table inside. She pointed to several large red lacquer carved boxes of different sizes and whispered, "Luo'er, can you put them in?" Ouyang Feiluo quickly understood and immediately set his gaze on several boxes, while muttering in his heart. "Stop." In the blink of an eye, several boxes disappeared on the dressing table. After putting it away, Ouyang Feiluo looked at her mother very consciously and asked, "Mother, is there anything else that needs to be hidden?" Upon hearing this, Su Yuzhu whispered, "Yes. While your father is tidying up and organizing the books and booklets in the study, your mother suggests that you take them." The mother and daughter pointed and received each other, which was a very tacit cooperation. The result was that when Ouyang Jin sorted out the books and booklets in the study and came over, all he saw was that except for the layout and decorations, all the other items were missing. He thought to himself, "Madam, how fast is it? It seems that Madam's lightness skills have improved again. Friends, starting today, 2 shifts a day. Please collect it. Thank you." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Does our son know martial arts? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Does our son know martial arts? Entering the room to take a look at her sleeping daughter, Ouyang Jin walked lightly to the outside and sat next to Su Yuzhu. He took her hand and gently patted her twice before whispering, "Madam, I have sorted out all the books and booklets in the study, and there are some unimportant ones left on the bookshelf. Tomorrow, if it's really like in Luo Air's dream, we still have to think about how to hide the silver coins. Exile, I don't know how many people have withdrawn their lives during exile. Master, I have thought about this matter. If we were to be exiled by a direct decree, perhaps we could still bring some things with us. It's already autumn now, with one autumn rain and one cold, but we need to wear 2 more clothes with us. Su paused for a moment and said again, Master, I feel that silver coins can be hidden in the soles of my shoes and corners of my clothes, but I don't know if I will be searched. Ouyang Jin looked at her sleeping daughter inside and whispered, I have an idea, but I have to make things worse for our precious daughter. Su Yuzhu was startled and turned her head to look at Ouyang Jin. Master, did you mean the gauze on Luo Air's head? Smart. But we need to talk to Luo Air about this. If she doesn't agree, we'll find a way. Su Yuzhu nodded and watched as the window gradually brightened up, feeling a sense of melancholy in her heart. It's time for Mao. Madam, I'll go to the courtyard of Luo Air and ask them to tidy up. You'll have to work hard on the rest. After saying that, Ouyang Jin lightly patted Su Yuzhu's hand again, got up, and walked out. Although I want my daughter to sleep a little longer, if today is really like what she said, her small lump won't be able to live up to her current luxurious lifestyle. Su Yuzhu sighed, got up and walked into the room, softly calling out, Luo Air, Luo Air. Feeling dazed as someone called her, Ouyang Feiluo opened her sleepy eyes and rubbed them before looking at Su Yuzhu and saying softly, Mother, is it dawn? Su Yuzhu nodded and said, It's already Mao hour. In 2 hours, it will be noon. Last night, my mother went back to your maternal grandmother's house. It's estimated that your aunt will come early this morning. Do you want Luo Air to see her? Ouyang Feiluo, who allowed Su Yuzhu to dress herself in a small dress, smiled when she heard her aunt and responded crisply. At the same time, she urged Su Yuzhu, yes. Mother, hurry up, we still need to go collect the baby. Yes, collect the treasure. Nowadays, Ouyang Feiluo has known all the memories of the original owner. In her memory, because her parents loved her, her brothers doted on her, and her maternal family also liked her, it made the lotus flower in the uncle's family feel jealous. That black lotus will use words to squeeze her whenever it finds an opportunity. Yesterday, she used the excuse of supporting her maid and pushed down the original owner who was playing on the rockery. She then hit her head on the edge of the rockery and suddenly fainted. The image in my memory is very clear. The ferocious face of Ouyang Feiluo after pushing down the original owner made her suddenly feel palpitations and fear, and she couldn't really fall asleep. She is taking the opportunity to sneak into Qinghe Garden today and take all the treasures that Ouyang Feiluo has been showing off in front of her all day. Ouyang Feiluo, a 13-year-old girl, actually poisoned a 4-year-old chubby pink dumpling on her. Uncle couldn't bear it, and aunt couldn't bear it. She must be punished. Su Yuzhu first went to the study with her dressed daughter, and after Ouyang Feiluo collected the compiled books and brochures, she carried her back to her own room. As she walked through the yard, she instructed the maid Yaya, who was already working in the yard, Yaya, bring some water, miss, wash up. Yes, madam. The crescent moon, who left in response, quickly brought in a basin of warm water and prepared to serve Ouyang Feiluo to wash up. However, Su Yuzhu stopped her and said, Crescent Moon, go and call all the people I brought from the Su family. I have something to say. Exile looked up at his wife Su Yuzhu in confusion, paused for a moment, and responded, Yes, madam. I'll go now. Su Yuzhu took this opportunity to personally wash her daughter's face and whispered about her master's idea of hiding the silver note in the gauze on her head. Ouyang Feiluo blinked her eyes and looked at her mother, saying, Mother, Daddy is so smart. I'll go to bed then. Mother, you must hold me well. Su Yuzhu smiled and said in a soft voice, Don't worry, hold it firmly, you won't be able to lose it. Ouyang Feiluo, who had been washed up, began to wander around in her own room. She is not admiring her quaint boudoir, but rather collecting her own belongings, which belong to her alone and are her small vault. She followed her memory to the dressing table, gently opened the drawer, and took out 2 red lacquer carved boxes from inside. Without looking closely, she put them into a separate space and stored them in the small vault she had reserved. As Ouyang Feiluo was collecting items from her boudoir, Su Yuzhu was looking at the maids and mother-in-law who had come from her mother's house to serve her and her family. She said seriously, "Now I'm telling you to listen, don't ask, don't make a sound." Upon hearing this sentence, everyone perked up their spirits, for this person had never spoken so seriously before, so there must be something wrong. And just now, they looked around and saw that all the people standing here were following Miss over to Ouyang's house. Su Yuzhu slowly spoke after listening to each one of her words, "Now stop your work and quickly go back to tidy up your personal belongings. Someone will come to pick you up later. What will you do in the future? Listen to my parents' arrangements, do you understand?" "Madam." Su Yuzhu waved her hand and said, "No need to ask much, just follow suit. If you still have embroidery work in your hands, hurry up and bring the items here. Go ahead, speed up." Listening to Su Yuzhu's serious and urgent tone, she cleverly thought that something might have happened. Miss, she wanted to arrange for them first. So, he quickly knelt down and kowtowed to Su Yuzhu, kowtowing 3 times before getting up and walking away. If there is one, there are 2, and one by one, follow suit. In no time, the 2 maids who had left walked over and put down the fabrics and unfinished dresses in their hands. They looked at Su Yuzhu with worried eyes and said, "Madam, can't the maid stay?" "Cannot. The same thing is happening in the neighboring Qingsong courtyard." The father and son instructed all the servants arranged by the Su family, and then asked them to pack their luggage and follow them when someone arrived. Seeing the serious-looking uncle, the few of them all kowtowed before turning around and leaving to tidy up. When people left, Ouyang Minglu asked Ouyang Jin, "Father, but what happened?" Ouyang Jin shook her head and whispered, "Throw the organized things into the next courtyard. Don't make too much noise, I'll go arrange for someone to pick them up." Ouyang Jin hurriedly walked into the yard and saw his wife standing in the yard. He quickly said, "Madam, please pick up the items for your sons." Upon hearing this, Su Yuzhu came to the wall of the courtyard and said, "Fly over directly with your belongings." As soon as the words fell, 3 people suddenly flew over from the neighboring yard, each holding something in their hands. This scene left Ouyang Jin speechless, and he instantly regained his senses. He pointed to his 3 sons and looked at his wife, saying, "Madam, do our sons know how to fight?" Su Yuzhu shrugged and nodded, "Master, I'm glad I secretly let my 3 sons practice martial arts." Then he turned to Ouyang Minglu Sanren. "You are also very good. Keep hiding your martial arts skills. This may be your way to save your life." "Yes, mother, remember." "Mother, where's the little sister?" After putting away the things and checking them again to make sure there were no omissions, Ouyang Feiluo, who had just emerged from the room, tilted her small head wrapped in gauze and said, "Brothers, I'm here." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Self-pickup of medical expenses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Self-pickup of medical expenses. Looking at the little sister who was not in any major trouble, the 3 of them breathed a sigh of relief. Then he put down his things and walked up to Ouyang Feiluo. He watched helplessly as the older brother picked up the cute and chubby little girl. Su Yuzhu knew that her daughter had another plan ahead, so she looked at the gentleman and said, "Master, you should still go out as usual, but today you can just take Lu Er and Su Er out and find a place to hang out. Just come back before noon." Ouyang Sol Tower and Ouyang Mingxiu gladly accepted his mother's order. From the moment they have memories, although mothers may be strict with them, they rarely make direct arrangements for them, unless it is the 2 of them. Looked at Su Yuzhu with a flirtatious look and said in the same voice, "Mother." Su Yuzhu waved her hand to signal them not to ask. Meanwhile, Ouyang Jin looked at her 2 sons and suddenly realized that she had truly failed. "My eldest son is already 15 years old. As a father, I didn't realize that he knew martial arts. How much did I ignore them to do this? After self-reflection, Ouyang Jin decided that no matter what happened in the future, she would definitely spend more time on her wife and children. The little girl is only so small and chubby, so she can't bump into each other. So, Ouyang Jin remained steadfast on her path of spoiling her daughter and never returned. Ouyang Jin looked at Su Yuzhu with some concern and said, "Madam, Lu'er and Su'er followed me out. We only have you and 2 children at home, and Lu'er has been injured again." "Master, it's okay. Remember to go back to your mansion before noon, father and son. Today, my parents will definitely let my sister-in-law come over, and I will arrange it at home." Seeing Su Yuzhu say so, Ouyang Jin nodded and went out with her 2 sons. To outsiders, this may seem normal, but only Ouyang Jin knows that his wife's intention is to ensure that those contracts can be transferred to her father-in-law and mother-in-law's name without any obstacles, otherwise they will all be compromised. Seeing the 3 of them leave, Su Yuzhu turned her head to her youngest son Ouyang Mingli and said, "Mingli, go and watch at the entrance of the mansion. Today, someone from my grandfather's family came to my house, but they didn't deliver the memorial in advance. My mother is worried that those people will make things difficult for them. You watch at the door, and when you see someone, bring them in. Remember, your sister broke her head and your mother couldn't pull her body away." Ouyang Mingli's eyes rolled and he quickly nodded in response, instructing Ouyang Feiluo, who was like a meatball, "Sister, don't run around. Third brother will be back in a while." Ouyang Feiluo was afraid that this 8-year-old hot-tempered little doll would fight, and advised, "Third brother, don't fight with anyone. We will have more time in the future." "Well, third brother remembers that we have plenty of time. First, third brother will go to the gatehouse to guard." After saying that, he raised his hand and rubbed the head of the meatball before jogging out all the way. Ouyang Feiluo took advantage of the still light sky and put all the luggage and packages in the space, dividing them into zones. Then she followed her mother to collect her father Ouyang Jin's belongings. If it weren't for worrying about Ouyang Jin's suspicion, Ouyang Feiluo would have collected her father's belongings long ago. But it's never too late to punish bad people, it's just a little longer. At the beginning of the hour, Ouyang Feiluo from Qinghe Garden went as usual to greet old lady Ouyang. This Ouyang Feiluo doesn't know if her mind fell on her mother's womb and she didn't bring it out, or if it's broken. Every day when she goes to greet old lady Ouyang, she always brings along the few maids in the yard. At this time, Qinghe Garden is a deserted place. As long as you can enter, you can think of how to cause trouble. As for their second bedroom, Mrs. Ouyang clearly stated that she would only go to greet them on the 1st or 15th day of the Lunar New Year, and what she should do on a regular basis. For Su Yuzhu, who is wielding swords and guns, that is great news. Today, it's neither the 1st nor the 15th day of junior high school, and their family doesn't need to go and greet them. They naturally do whatever they want to do. Knowing her daughter's plan, Su Yuzhu cooperated very well and carried her out of the Hejin courtyard, then avoided the occasional maids and flew into the Qinghe Garden. Place Ouyang Feiluo in the yard and say softly, "Lu'er, move faster." Ouyang Feiluo nodded slightly, looked left and right, and then walked towards one of the rooms. Gently pushing the door, it opened, and a smile on her chubby face that didn't belong to her age appeared. Then she entered the room lightly and headed straight into the interior. Looking around, Ouyang Feiluo set her gaze on the dressing table adorned with red agate. She walked up and gently pulled at the drawer, where 2 carved boxes of rosewood caught her eye. Without hesitation, she opened a box, took out the top layer, and collected all the silver coins placed at the bottom of the box. These were her medical expenses, restoring the original state. He processed some jewelry from another box and then put it back in its original place before exiting the room. The rest of the things, Ouyang Feiluo did not touch. This is about to be exiled, she needs to see the self-righteous by Lian's appearance when she can't take away her treasures. Su Yuzhu saw her daughter act like a successful cat, with a triumphant smile on her face. Her originally heavy heart instantly lightened, and with a slight smile, she picked up Ouyang Feiluo and quickly disappeared into the Qinghe garden. Returning to the courtyard of Hejin, everything was proceeding smoothly as usual. Su Yuzhu placed the little figure in her arms on the bed and softly said, "Luo, sleep well for a while, mother will keep watch." Ouyang Feiluo didn't want to make her mother worry. She obediently nodded and allowed Su Yuzhu to take off her coat. Then, she slipped into bed and closed her eyes, whispering, "Mother, I'm asleep." Su Yuzhu smiled lightly and followed her words, "Yes, my mother knows that our Luo is asleep. My mother, we are guarding Luo and not going anywhere." Thank you, mother." After speaking, Ouyang Feiluo yawned indecently and said nothing more. Gently patting the brocade quilt covering Ouyang Feiluo's body, Su Yuzhu finally felt relieved when she saw her breathing evenly. She has been worried that her daughter was frightened yesterday and cannot sleep peacefully. Now it seems that it's also a good thing for her to tinker around, at least to be able to fall asleep. At the end of the hour, Ouyang Mingli hurriedly walked into the courtyard with Feng Wanqin and her daughter. After asking the maid, they found out that their mother was in their sister's room. They quickly led someone to carry her into Ouyang Feiluo's room. "Mother, my second aunt and my younger sister Wana are here," she whispered as she tiptoed towards the interior. Upon hearing the sound, Su Yuzhu nodded and walked lightly out of the room. As she looked at Feng Wanqin holding Su Junwan, Su felt a moment of discomfort. Thinking about what was going to happen today, she quickly put aside her discomfort and looked at Feng Wanqin, saying, "Sister-in-law, thank you for going this way. We have arranged for the maidservants and servants to tidy up," and at this moment, the second sister-in-law quickly took them away. "Second sister-in-law, don't ask anything. You'll know afternoon. Mingli, go to the next door and bring the servant over." "Yes, mother." Ouyang Mingli responded and quickly walked out. Feng didn't expect it to be so urgent. She grabbed Su Yuzhu and took out a stack of silver bills from her arms, stuffing them into her hand. She instructed, "Keep them away. If something really happens, you can save them. Don't worry at home, we'll be brothers and sisters-in-law. Little sister, if there's anything else, remember to send a letter to your home. Our whole family will come together and we can always get through." Su Yuzhu pinched the silver note in her hand and whispered with red eyes, "Sister-in-law, don't worry, thank you." While the sister-in-law was talking, Ouyang Mingli had already led the people to the outside of Hejin courtyard. He turned his head and looked at the few people and said, "Wait here for a while, I'll go and come." "Yes, young master, free." Hurriedly entering the yard, he saw his mother and second aunt walking out of the house with Su Junwan, and then said, "Mother, they have brought it over. They are all outside the courtyard door." Su Yuzhu looked at the maid and mother-in-law in the yard, who were already carrying a bundle. Her eyes were red, but she gritted her teeth and still said, "The new moon welcomes the moon. You and your group should follow second lady now and hurry. Madam. Let's go." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Being Imprisoned. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Being Imprisoned. Su looked at Feng with a reluctant expression and said, "Second sister-in-law, please. Wanjie, be good. When my aunt has time, she will take Sister Luo to see you." Little Wana, who had been silent for a long time, replied with a milky voice, Auntie, sister." In the words of her young aunt Su Yuzhu, Feng realized the urgency of the matter and did not stop. She nodded directly at Su Yuzhu and then walked out of the yard first. Ouyang Mingli consciously led a group of people to follow closely behind. The angry expression made all the maids and servants who wanted to inquire stop, and they could only watch helplessly as they walked by under the leadership of Feng Shi and Ouyang Mingli, who were emitting anger. A group of people safely left Ouyang Mansion. Immediately after, Ouyang Mingli watched them disappear into the corner of the street with tears in his eyes. And he himself found a place to sit outside the mansion, with a tight face waiting for his father and two brothers. Ouyang Mingli looked up at the sky and murmured absent-mindedly, "It's already early morning, is noon still far away?" He had heard about lunchtime several times, and the meaning revealed in his mother's words was that something might happen after lunchtime, and it was a big deal, otherwise his second aunt would not have taken those people away. Sitting on the steps outside the mansion, Ouyang Mingli looked around and pondered carefully in his heart. He felt the tense atmosphere at home and the faint concern of his mother at this moment. The father and son of Ouyang Jin, who were rushing home, were so anxious that they were all about to go into bed. On the way back just now, his father-in-law sent someone to inform him that his father Ouyang Hong and elder brother Ouyang Hui had been imprisoned, and the reason was not very clear. He was asked to return to Ouyang Mansion as soon as possible. Upon hearing this, the father and son remembered that they had never seen those two people in the mansion since yesterday. They didn't expect to be imprisoned, so they hurriedly rushed to the mansion. The two sons of the Su family were not at home, so Shuzhou had to personally go out to inquire about what the Ouyang family had committed and how they would be sentenced. It was only then that he realized why his daughter was so anxious, thinking that Ouyang Hong and Ouyang Hui were both imprisoned at the same time. Shuzhou pondered the meaning behind it. Ouyang Hong was a third-rank official who served as the Grand Minister, responsible for presiding over ceremonies and other related matters. Even if he made a mistake, he would not make a mistake in the court. This time, I was completely implicated by this self-righteous Ouyang Hui. Yesterday, the court was discussing the current relationship between Wuxi Kingdom and neighboring countries. However, Ouyang Hui, the young minister of our Zhan government, unexpectedly spoke up to fight. This caused the court, which was whispering about this matter, to enter a state of silence for an instant. Finally, he ignored the look from his father's eyes and casually said an unrealistic thing, even mentioning the crown prince. This led the person sitting on top to order him to be taken down. Ouyang Hong quickly knelt down to plead for mercy, forgetting that he was in a fit of anger, and ended up getting himself involved. At the same time, the minister also issued an edict to the court. All the ministers must not leave the Jinluan Hall before noon tomorrow. Su Zhou was able to know all this because a young eunuch in the palace remembered that he was a relative of the Su family in the Ouyang family, and his master had also received kindness from the Su family. After reporting to his master, he took the opportunity to find something new outside the palace to inform Su Zhou of this matter. After hearing this, Shuzhou quickly thanked him and personally sent the person out of the mansion. Immediately after, he sent someone to search for Ouyang Jin. While thinking of finding out who was the best, the father and son of Ouyang Jin hurriedly returned to the mansion and saw the third son Ouyang Mingli sitting on the steps outside the mansion. They quickly stepped forward and patted him, saying urgently, "Hurry into the mansion, go back to the yard and accompany your mother and sister. Dad will go to Grandma's place." After speaking, Ouyang Jin didn't stop and ran straight towards old lady Ouyang's plum garden. Ouyang Mingli, who was unaware of his whereabouts, was pulled by his two brothers to rush towards the Hejin courtyard. Meiyuan. "Li Mama, is my mother here?" Li Mama saw Ouyang Jin running with sweat all over her head and thought to herself, "Isn't something wrong?" "Second master, the old lady is taking a nap," he said, bowing and bowing. "Hurry up and see if the old man is awake. If not, forget it, I'll go by myself," she said as she walked towards Mrs. Ouyang's door. Knocking and knocking. Li Mama had never seen such an anxious second master before, so she knocked on the door and whispered, "Fendai, tell the old lady that second master has an urgent matter." As soon as Li Mama finished speaking, a crisp voice rang out in the room. "Mama, wait a moment, Fendai will go right away." Pindai, dressed in a light pink dress, quickly walked to the bedside of old lady Ouyang and softly called out, "Old lady, old lady, old lady, second master has an urgent matter to report." Upon hearing the voice of Fendai, Mrs. Ouyang whimpered and slowly opened her eyes. She sat up from the bed and said in a deep voice, "Ouyang Jin has an urgent matter to report." Li Mama said that the second master has an urgent matter to report to the old lady. He's just in charge of urgent matters coming from there. Why didn't he just watch the shop run back and do it? What's the point of him having any urgent matters? Let's just go and let him go. After finishing speaking with a calm expression on his face, he lay back and closed his eyes to take a nap. Mrs. Ouyang's voice was not low, and standing outside, Ouyang Jin couldn't help but hear her words in her ears. She really wanted to brush her sleeves and leave. However, he suppressed the raging fire in his heart and loudly said outside the door, "Since my mother is missing, my son won't disturb my mother's lunch break. I just heard that my father and elder brother have been imprisoned, so I don't think anything will happen." After speaking, without looking back, he stepped out of Lady Ouyang's plum garden. Old Lady Ouyang, who had just fallen asleep with her eyes closed, sat up when she heard Ouyang Jin's words outside the room. In an instant, there was no longer any thought of taking a nap in the afternoon. He nervously asked, "Fendai, did you hear what that bastard said just now?" "Madam, I heard you. The old master and the old master went to court yesterday and have not returned yet," said Fendai, bending her knees and cautiously, "Someone. Someone." With Mrs. Ouyang shouting loudly, the maids and women who heard the sound quickly walked over and bowed, "Madam. Fendai, hurry up and inform the butler to send someone out to find the master and uncle, and see where they are now. You all put down your work and keep an eye on Hajin Yuan. I want to see what they're up to." "Yes. Yes." With a series of responses, the people who heard the sound quickly walked away one by one. As he watched the maid and mother-in-law leave, old man Ouyang suddenly felt an ominous feeling in his heart. He pondered inwardly. Is what that bastard Ouyang Jin said true? At this moment, although Ouyang Jin was worried about his father and big brother, since his mother had said that, he would still go back to the yard to accompany his wife and children. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Exile 3000 miles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Exile 3000 miles. Hurriedly returning to the Hajin courtyard, Ouyang Jin saw his wife admonishing his 3 sons. "It's almost the end of noon now, and you must remember what your mother will say to you next." Old San Ouyang Mingli, who has always been the best at judging the situation, looked at his mother's serious expression and asked seriously, "Mother, are we leaving here?" Su Yuzhu nodded and whispered, "Your sister bumped her head and had a nightmare. In the dream, our whole family was exiled after noon today. Both my mother and father thought it wasn't true, but they were afraid it was, so they arranged it that way. Now that your grandfather and uncle are both in prison, and our whole family has been exiled, perhaps it's true." Upon hearing this, the 3 brothers looked at Su Yuzhu in shock and shouted together, "Mother." Su Yuzhu sighed and anxiously instructed, "You must remember not to use force on your own along the way. Take care of your sister, and if there is anything, your parents will take care of it." "Yes, my son has taken note of it," said the 3 brothers with a serious expression as they swept away their past carelessness. Ouyang Jin entered the yard and looked around, but didn't see her soft little girl. She spoke up and asked, "Madam, it's almost time. Where's our daughter?" "In the room, don't wake her up. Listen to Madam." After the response, Ouyang Jin sat down. A family of 5 sat in the outer room of Ouyang Feiluo's room, occasionally picking up teacups and taking a sip of tea. As for what was on their minds, only they probably knew. Li, the butler who received the order from Madame Ouyang, not only sent a few servants out to search, but also rushed towards the direction of the palace gate. However, just a few steps away, I heard an urgent voice. "Manager Li, Manager Li." Li, the hurried butler, looked for his reputation and saw Chen Sherlang, who had not yet had time to change his court uniform. He quickly approached and respectfully asked, "Did Mr. Chen just call me?" "Hurry back to the mansion and inform your old lady that your master and grandfather were imprisoned yesterday. I have just come out of the palace and have to hurry home. You should go and inquire about it." Chen Shilang quickly finished speaking and left with a limp. Can you avoid limping? That person yesterday, for some reason, made them all kneel in the court for a day and a night, truly fulfilling the sentence, accompanying you is like accompanying a tiger. Watching Chen Shilang limp away, the Li family thanked him and hurriedly headed towards the mansion. Quickly walking to the plum blossom garden, under the guidance of the maidservant, I saw old lady Ouyang and quickly knelt down to report, "Old lady, just now Chen Shilang came to deliver a message, saying that the old master and the old master were imprisoned yesterday, and Chen Shilang only came out of the palace." Mrs. Ouyang, who was enjoying the little maid pounding her shoulder, stood up and exclaimed in surprise, "What? What are you waiting for? Go and inquire about the news about the master and the master." Li, the butler, got up in a hurry and murmured, "Yes, yes, I'm going now." As he spoke, he quickly ran out of the plum garden. The people who were previously sent by Butler Li to inquire about the news have returned one after another. The news they received was the same. They were about to report to Butler Li when they heard a panicked servant say, "There are officers and soldiers coming." The master and uncle were escorted back, followed by many officers and soldiers. Roaming and rumbling, this was like a thunderous cry, causing panic in the Ouyang mansion. Quickly, the entire mansion learned that the officers and soldiers had also surrounded Ouyang mansion in a tight and airtight manner. Wu Shiji, the Minister of War, led the bound father and son Ouyang Hong and Ouyang Hui into the Ouyang mansion. Looking at the person kneeling on the ground, Wu Shiji, the Minister of War, restrained his expression and unfolded the bright yellow imperial edict in his hand. The emperor has an edict. The young minister of the Zhanshi mansion, Ouyang Hui, bullied the monarch and abused his power, taking bribes and violating the law. It has been confirmed that he should have been executed by his family. However, Nian Taichang, with all his heart, ordered all the men, women, and family members of the Ouyang mansion to be exiled 3,000 miles northwest. The servants and maids in the mansion are temporarily being taken into custody. We will make a decision after verifying the situation. Thank you. After reading the imperial edict, he looked at Ouyang Hong sitting on the ground and said, "Lord Ouyang, take the edict." After Ouyang Hongsheng accepted the imperial edict and kowtowed to show gratitude, Wu Shiji searched for General Su's daughter among the kneeling people. The next moment, he unexpectedly saw General Su's daughter holding a sleeping little girl in her arms, with a bright red gauze wrapped around her head. At this moment, he felt a little worried in his heart. However, at this moment, there was no room for him to think too much. He glanced again at Ouyang Feiluo, who was wrapped in gauze. The Minister of War, Wu Shiji, shouted from behind, "Someone, send off Lord Ouyang and his family immediately." Step, step, step. A strong and powerful sound of footsteps suddenly sounded. 4 words appeared in the heart of old Master Ouyang. "The situation has passed." Immediately after, I fainted. Jiang, the eldest daughter law next to her, was crying like a pear blossom with rain, and her charm still lingered. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably feel pity. However, Wu Shiji, who had heard about some things in the Ouyang family, did not even glance at Jiangshi, but instead looked at Ouyang Qin, the third son of the Ouyang family, and his wife Jiangshi. Although this couple had a worried expression on their faces, they were only momentarily shocked and they heard of exile, and then chose to remain silent. This is completely different from what is rumored in the outside world. Immediately, Wu Shiji looked up at the decadent Ouyang Hong and then at the unwilling Ouyang Hui. Suddenly, he became curious about how Ouyang Hong and his family would walk the upcoming 3,000 miles. Just as Wu Shiji was observing the crowd kneeling on the ground, a leading officer and soldier walked over and arched his hand, saying, "Sir, you have brought the shackles and hemp rope." Put it on, hurry up and set off." "Yes, sir." As the words fell, the leading officers and soldiers raised their hands, and immediately a group of officers and soldiers came to put shackles on the 4 of Ouyang's father and son. The female family members and men under 18 years old tied their hands in front of them with ropes and strung them together. Ouyang Hong felt a bit regretful when he saw his second and youngest sons, who were also shackled, both bowing their heads and not speaking. However, what's the use of regret at this moment? Fortunately, the death penalty has been waived, exiled, and there is still a glimmer of hope everything went smoothly, but there was a problem when binding Ouyang Feiluo. Ouyang Feiluo, who was originally stunned, suddenly shouted, "I don't want it, I don't want it, don't tie me up, I don't want to be exiled. Grandmother, grandfather, save Lianer quickly. Lianer, don't be tied up, Lianer, don't leave here. Brother Cha, I have money. I'll give you all my treasures. Don't tie me up, don't tie me up." Wu Shiji, who was thinking of finding an opportunity to give General Su's daughter some silver coins for a while, suddenly heard a loud shout that was louder than before and immediately said in a deep voice, "What are you waiting for? Just plug her mouth and tie it firmly." Due to Ouyang Feiluo's loud shout and fierce struggle, the official who had not tied her up quickly spoke up and said, "Yes, sir." With the help of two other officials, Ouyang Feiluo, who was struggling, was finally tied up and calmly walked towards the next person amidst her angry and biting gaze. Just as they were about to be tied up, the officers and soldiers responsible for copying the house hurriedly walked over. The leading general came to Wu World and reported, "Sir, I have found a secret room in the study of Chao Hui Academy, which is full of boxes of gold and silver. Please move, sir. Friends, please support Meow Meow's new work and watch it for a while every day, please." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Tears and Kneel Farewell to Relatives. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Tears and Kneel Farewell to Relatives, Chao Hui Courtyard. Yes. I asked the servant. Chao Hui Courtyard is the courtyard of Ouyang Shaozanshi, the eldest son of Lord Ouyang. Upon hearing this, Wu Shiji turned his head to look at Ouyang Hong and said calmly, "Oh. Lord Ouyang, I don't think I need to say anything now. You understand now." Ouyang Hong, who didn't believe that his son would be corrupt and lawless, was still shouting for justice in front of the palace. When he heard the report from the general, he immediately vented his anger and looked at his eldest son, who was looking down. What else was there that he didn't understand? I thought it was deliberately fabricated by that person, but I didn't expect it to be true. This is really unfortunate for my family. Looking at the expressions of the father and son, Wu Shiji also felt sorry for Ouyang Hong. This is really a mouse droppings, it ruined a pot of soup. Let's go. Wu Shiji shouted loudly, then looked at Xiao Qi behind him and whispered, "You take Xiao Ba and Xiao Jiu with you. Take care of yourself on the way and tell Meng Yi that you can endure some hardships, but don't let anyone die." While speaking, he didn't forget to use his eyes to signal Xiaoqi to look at Su Yuzhu and her daughter. Xiaoqi glanced calmly and saw that the little girl held in Su Yuzhu's arms was injured, and her forehead was still there. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly. He knows the lady holding the little girl, who is the youngest daughter of General Su. The one in her arms should be General Su's granddaughter. Just, how could this little girl be hurt so badly? Seeing Xiaoqi nodded calmly, Wu Shiji raised his hand and asked Meng Yi, who was responsible for escorting the Ouyang family, to take them away. Put your hand into your sleeve pocket, fold the silver banknotes inside, and then hold them in your hand. As you pass by Su Yuzhu, insert the banknotes into her arm bend. Su Yuzhu, who felt something unusual, nodded silently to express her gratitude. She knew that this person was the current Minister of War Wu Shiji, who was once a subordinate of his father. She stuffed things for herself, probably also considering her father's affection. Mrs. Ouyang suddenly fainted, and as she grew older, she was surrounded by Ouyang Feiluo, who had been silenced, and Jiangshi, who looked pitiful and delicate. I don't know if it was intentional, but Ouyang Hui's two sons, 17-year-old Ouyang Mingqing and 15-year-old Ouyang Mingyan, happened to be by the side of Ouyang Madam. Behind them were Ouyang Jin's family, and finally Ouyang Qin's family. And Ouyang Hong and his three sons, wearing handcuffs and ankle shackles, walked at the forefront of these people. The in-laws who have received news of the exile of the Ouyang family have some who have fainted directly, some who have been crying, and others who are thinking of a way, calculating their time, and planning to go to the Tenli pavilion outside the capital to see them off. Watching Meng Yi and others escorting the Ouyang Hong family away, Wu Shiji shook his head and sighed before following the previously reported generals towards the Chaohui Academy. Upon seeing the boxes of gold and silver that could blind people's eyes, as well as various antique porcelain, Wu Shiji felt that Ouyang Hui was just being exiled for 6,000 miles, which was cheaper for him. However, those who were implicated because of him suffered since it is home theft. It means that every courtyard, even the rockery, needs to be inspected. When the group arrived at the Hejin courtyard and inquired, they found out that there was nothing valuable in the courtyard except for decorations and some brocade fabrics. Wu Shiji looked up again at the three words, Hejin Yuan, and suddenly realized that he had done his homework. That's good, at least there's a bit of confidence. Glancing at the courtyard again, he turned around and walked towards other places. The Ouyang family, who were escorted by Meng Yi, are now walking on the streets of the capital, with pale faces and decadent spirits, making those who see them sigh deeply. Yes, yesterday I was still a somewhat powerful courtier, today I am exiled, or in the cold northwest. The contrast between this night is really huge. The servants and maids of the Su and Jiang families were also in the crowd, watching their young ladies with tears in their eyes. They dared not step forward, but could only pray in their hearts. A safe journey and an early return. The Su family has also received news from the entire family. The only ones in charge of the family are the former General Su Zhou and his second daughter Li Feiluo. The rest of them have gone out to investigate Su Yuzhu's return of the renamed industry. Su Zhou sat in the reception room and thought carefully, instructing his second daughter. In Li Feiluo, the property left by Pearl needs to be taken care of. It's uncertain when they will come back. Yes, Dad, my daughter Li knows. It's just that my daughter Li hasn't seen Luo'er today. I heard that Luo'er was injured in the head by her cousin Ouyang Feiluo. Humph. I don't know how many ghosts are working in the Ouyang family. Go and instruct the butler to prepare some good wine and dishes. Later, I will personally go to the Shirley Pavilion to practice for my Pearl and take a look at that old guy. Just as he finished speaking, he suddenly thought of something and continued, go to the kitchen and see how the dry food is doing. I'll take it with me later. Yes, Dad, my daughter Li is going now. After bowing, he immediately left the hall and walked away quickly. Not long after, Feng led a few people to the reception hall and had them wait outside. She walked into the reception hall and said to Su Zhou, who was sitting in the main seat, Dad, everything is ready. Well, you are so caretaker. If your mother comes back, please advise. I'll go see them off. Yes, Dad. Watching Su Zhou and a few people leave the general's mansion, Feng felt powerless in her heart. It was also at this moment that she understood why her sister Li was so eager to save those maids, women, and servants. If I had thought about it myself, I would have been so anxious to get into a room long ago. It seems that I, as a sister Li, may not have as much courage as this sister Li. At this moment, Feng also set a goal for himself, which was to emulate his sister Li, remain calm in the face of danger, and be prepared for the future. Su Yuzhu, who was being remembered by others, was walking on the streets of the capital with her sleeping daughter in her arms. As she was about to reach the city gate, she suddenly felt a sense of unease in her heart. Her eyes turned red as she looked at the nearby city gate. Stepping out of the capital with heavy footsteps, they turned back and looked at each other, their eyes filled with unwillingness, sadness, resentment, and a debt owed to their loved one. Su Yuzhu ignored the others and looked at her three sons in a low voice, saying, kneel down, kowtow to your grandfather and the others. With a thud, she hugged her daughter and knelt down first, kowtowing her head. Ouyang Jin and his three sons followed closely behind, kneeling and kowtowing. Upon seeing this, Ouyang Qin walked towards his wife Jiang Yun and whispered, madam, let's also kowtow to our father. In law and them. It's me who caused you trouble. Jiang Yun's mind instantly collapsed. She knelt down, kowtowed her head, and cried, Mom and Dad, my daughter is unfilial. Sobbing. People who saw this scene outside the city gate couldn't help but shed tears when they heard the cries. Perhaps it was Jiang Yun's shout that woke up the big house, and Jiang also knelt down and cried. For a moment, there were constant cries, and Meng Yi looked at Xiao Qi and the three of them with a headache. Xiao Qi nodded and walked up to Ouyang Hong, saying, Lord Ouyang, we have to hurry on our way, otherwise we won't be able to get to our residence before dark. Upon hearing that this person was still calling him an adult, Ouyang Hong nodded gratefully and responded, Thank you very much. I'll tell them about it now. Seeing Xiao Qi nod, Ouyang Hong looked at the crowd and said in a deep voice, If you want to camp in the wilderness tonight, then continue to stay here and cry. After saying this, he ignored the crowd and walked forward. Upon hearing Ouyang Hong's words, old lady Ouyang fainted again. She also wants to cry. Her family is also in the capital now. If she is not here, what will her nephews and nieces do in the future? End of this chapter.